She manipulated my dying father into changing his will, leaving me with nothing but debt. But when she started renovating her new mansion, I smiled. The property records showed a different owner, me. Now she's invested her entire fortune into improving my house. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who could watch someone destroy themselves and feel satisfaction. But watching my stepsister Vanessa pour millions into renovating my property, thinking it was hers, that brought me a special kind of joy. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. This story begins with my father's second marriage when I was 16. That's when Vanessa and her mother Patricia entered our lives, bringing their expensive tastes and manipulation tactics with them. Dad had built his fortune through smart real estate investments, turning a small inheritance into a multi-million-dollar portfolio of luxury properties. He'd always taught me to understand the value of every transaction, every contract, and every property deed. "The devil's in the details, Sarah," he would say, reviewing documents with me in his home office. "Never sign anything without reading every word." Those lessons would eventually save me, though not in the way he intended. When Dad married Patricia, our peaceful life changed dramatically. Patricia and Vanessa, who was 2 years older than me, treated our home like their personal shopping mall. Their excessive spending habits worried me, but Dad was too enchanted with Patricia to notice. "Your father works hard so we can enjoy life," Patricia would say, dismissing my concerns. "Don't be so uptight, Sarah. You should learn to appreciate luxury like your sister." Stepsister. I always mentally corrected her. Vanessa wasn't my sister, and her attitude made sure I never forgot it. "Oh, Sarah," Vanessa would sigh, showing off her latest designer purchase. "You really should make more effort with your appearance. No wonder you're still single." I focused on my education instead, earning my degree in business and real estate law, just as Dad had encouraged before Patricia came into our lives. But as the years passed, I watched him change. The sharp businessman who'd taught me to read contracts became increasingly distant, deferring to Patricia's judgment on everything. Then came the diagnosis: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months. I was devastated, but Patricia and Vanessa saw an opportunity. They began their campaign immediately, isolating Dad from me through a series of small, calculated moves. "Sarah's so busy with her career," Patricia would tell him when I called. "She said she'll visit next week instead." I never said that. When I did visit, they made sure I couldn't be alone with him. There was always a nurse they'd hired, or a family friend, who needed to discuss something urgent. But I wasn't completely in the dark. Years of working in real estate had taught me to keep my eyes open and my mouth shut. I noticed the stream of lawyers visiting the house. I saw the documents Patricia carefully tucked away whenever I entered the room. 2 weeks before Dad passed away, Vanessa couldn't resist gloating. "You should prepare yourself," she smirked over coffee one morning. "Things are going to change around here." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Let's just say Dad finally saw things clearly. He understood who really deserved his legacy." I felt sick to my stomach, but I maintained my composure. That same afternoon, I made some discreet calls to my contacts in the county records office. What I discovered made my blood run cold. They had convinced Dad to change his will, yes. But they'd also had him sign over most of his properties to Vanessa directly, all except one. The crown jewel of his portfolio, the historic mansion on Maple Grove, had a different paper trail. 6 months earlier, Dad had transferred it to me through a quiet, private transaction. He must have done it right after his diagnosis, before Patricia and Vanessa could sink their claws in too deep. The transfer was buried under layers of holding companies, but it was legally airtight. The day after Dad's funeral, Patricia and Vanessa could barely contain their glee as the lawyer read the will. I sat quietly, playing my part as the disinherited daughter, as they distributed Dad's assets between themselves. "And to my daughter Sarah," the lawyer read, "I leave my outstanding debts and obligations, totaling approximately $180,000. Vanessa's triumphant smile made my stomach turn, but I kept my face carefully blank. I understand if you need a moment, the lawyer said kindly. I shook my head. No need. I accept my inheritance. Patricia looked surprised at my calm acceptance. She probably expected tears, begging, or anger. Instead, I simply stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked out of the office. 2 days later, Vanessa called me. I'm having a housewarming party at the Maple Grove mansion next month, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I know things are tight for you right now, but you should come. It is your childhood home, after all. One last chance to say goodbye. I paused before responding. That's very thoughtful of you, Vanessa. I'll be there. Really? She sounded disappointed by my composure. Well, good. Oh, and I'm starting renovations next week. The place needs a complete overhaul to meet my standards. I'm sure you'll make it beautiful, I replied, then hung up before she could hear my smile. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the property records for the Maple Grove mansion. The ownership was carefully hidden behind 3 different LLCs, but the trail led clearly back to me. Dad's final gift wasn't just the property. It was a lesson in paying attention to the details. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop to check the renovation permits Vanessa had filed. The scope was massive: new wings, a pool house, extensive landscaping, and complete interior remodeling. The budget made me whistle. She was planning to spend nearly her entire inheritance on upgrading my house. The contractor's timeline estimated 18 months of work. I could wait. After all, every improvement she made would only increase the property's value. I took another sip of wine and smiled. Vanessa thought she was building her dream home, but she was really just investing millions in my property. And I had the next year and a half to plan exactly how I would reveal that fact. The game was just beginning, and for once, I had all the cards. The next 6 months were an exercise in patience and strategic planning. I watched from a careful distance as Vanessa poured money into renovating my property, each change documented meticulously through building permits and contractor invoices that I monitored through my connections at the county office. The renovation itself became the talk of the neighborhood. Vanessa made sure of that, hosting elaborate progress parties, where she would showcase the latest improvements to her carefully curated social circle. I attended each one, playing the role of the gracious, defeated sister. "Sarah, darling," Vanessa would exclaim with false warmth whenever I arrived. "I'm so glad you could make it. It must be difficult, seeing all these changes to your childhood home." I would simply smile and compliment whatever garish addition she'd made that week. The imported Italian marble in the foyer, the custom-built wine cellar, the hand-painted murals in the grand ballroom. Each improvement added hundreds of thousands to the property's value, and Vanessa didn't spare any expense. One evening, during a particularly lavish party celebrating the completion of the East Wing, I overheard her talking to her friend Madison. "Can you believe Sarah still comes to these parties?" Vanessa laughed, champagne glass in hand. "It's almost pathetic. But I suppose when you're living in a tiny apartment, you'll take any chance to experience luxury." Madison giggled. "You're too kind, letting her visit. I would have banned her completely." "Oh, I enjoy it," Vanessa replied. "It's so satisfying watching her try to hide her jealousy. Besides, Daddy always wanted her to learn about property management. Now she gets to see how it's really done." I had to suppress a laugh. If only she knew. Meanwhile, Patricia had her own renovation projects underway with the other properties they'd taken from Dad's estate. But unlike the careful way Dad had managed his investments, their approach was all flash and no substance. They borrowed heavily against the properties to fund their expensive tastes, using one loan to pay off another. I kept track of every transaction through my industry contacts. The house of cards they were building was impressive, but ultimately unsustainable. They were leveraging everything on the assumption that the Maple Grove mansion would be their safety net, the one property they owned free and clear. One afternoon, about 8 months into the renovation, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Green, Dad's old friend and business partner. "Sarah, do you have a minute to talk?" His voice was serious. "It's about your father's properties." We met at his office downtown. Thomas looked troubled as he spread some documents across his desk. I've been watching what Patricia and Vanessa are doing with the portfolio your father built, he said. It's concerning. They're taking out loans they can't possibly repay, using cross-collateralization that would make your father roll in his grave. I nodded. I've noticed. The only thing keeping their whole scheme afloat is the Maple Grove property. They're using its supposed value as leverage for everything else. He paused, studying my face. But something's not right with those property records. I've been in real estate for 40 years, and I've never seen ownership buried so deep. I smiled slightly. Dad always said the devil's in the details. Thomas's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Sarah, do you own Maple Grove? I do. Dad transferred it to me 6 months before he died. Clean title, no liens, completely separate from the estate. He sat back, letting out a low whistle. Does anyone else know? Not yet. But they will. Thomas shook his head, a mix of admiration and concern on his face. Your father taught you well. But Sarah, when this comes out— I know, I said quietly. It will destroy them. They've invested everything they have in renovating my property, and they're using its perceived ownership to secure loans on everything else. Are you sure you want to go through with this? They're still family in a way. I thought about all the times they'd belittled me, manipulated my father, and treated me like an outsider in my own home. They stopped being family the moment they took advantage of my dying father, I replied firmly. Besides, I'm not doing anything to them. They're doing it to themselves. I'm just waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. That moment came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, Vanessa announced she was hosting a grand gala to celebrate the renovation's halfway point. She'd invited everyone who was anyone in the local real estate and social scenes. The guest list included potential investors for her next big project, a luxury condo development she was planning to finance by leveraging the mansion. The evening of the gala, I arrived early. Vanessa was directing staff, looking every inch the lady of the manor in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Sarah, she called out, you're here early. Come, you have to see what I've done with Dad's old study. I followed her to the room where Dad had taught me about contracts and property law. It had been completely transformed into a modern home office, all chrome and glass, with no trace of the warm wood and leather that had made it Dad's sanctuary. Much better than that stuffy old room, don't you think? Vanessa gestured proudly. I'm meeting potential investors here tonight. This room is going to help me launch my own real estate empire. I ran my hand along Dad's old desk, now painted white and used as a decorative console table. It's quite a change, I said softly. Change is good, Sarah. You should try it sometime. She gave me a patronizing smile. Now, do try not to hover around the investors tonight. I know you work in real estate too, if you can call it that, but these are serious players. I smiled. Don't worry, Vanessa. I won't interfere with your big night. As guests began to arrive, I positioned myself near the grand staircase, watching the show unfold. Vanessa was in her element, leading tours and discussing her vision for future projects. Patricia floated through the crowd, dropping hints about her daughter's business acumen and the value of the property. I checked my watch. Any minute now. Right on cue, Thomas arrived with a group of serious-looking men in expensive suits. The potential investors. Vanessa immediately swooped in to greet them. Gentlemen, welcome to Maple Grove, she beamed. I'm so pleased you could join us tonight to discuss the future of luxury development in our city. Thomas caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. It was time. Before we discuss any investments, Thomas said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, there's a small matter of property ownership we need to clarify. Vanessa's perfect smile faltered slightly. The ownership is perfectly clear, Mr. Green. I inherited Maple Grove from my father. Actually, I said, stepping forward, you didn't. The room grew quiet as heads turned toward us. Patricia appeared at Vanessa's side, her face tight with concern. What is this about? Patricia demanded. I opened my briefcase and removed a folder. These are the complete property records for Maple Grove, showing the chain of ownership. 6 months before Dad died, he transferred the property to me through a series of holding companies. That's impossible, Vanessa snapped, but I could see the first flicker of fear in her eyes. Would you like to see the documents? I offered the folder to the investors. They're quite detailed. Dad always said the devil's in the details. The lead investor, a man named Harrison Wells, took the folder and began reviewing it with his colleagues. The murmuring in the room grew louder. This is ridiculous, Patricia declared. We have documentation proving the property was part of the estate. You have documents showing Dad's other properties, I corrected her. But Maple Grove was transferred long before the will was changed. It was never part of the estate. She's lying, Vanessa said desperately to the investors. This is just jealousy. I've spent millions renovating this property. Yes, I agreed calmly. You have. You've spent millions renovating my house. Thank you for that, by the way. The improvements are beautiful. Harrison Wells looked up from the documents. These records appear legitimate. The property is indeed owned by Ms. Sarah Mitchell through a series of LLCs. He turned to Vanessa. You've been renovating a property you don't own. The color drained from Vanessa's face. But the loans. Ah, yes, the loans, I said. The ones you took out against your other properties, using Maple Grove as collateral? That could be problematic, since you never owned it. Patricia grabbed my arm. You can't do this. We're family. I pulled away from her grip. Family? You manipulated my dying father, isolated him from me, and tried to steal everything he built. That's not family. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas addressed the crowd, I suggest we adjourn this gathering. It seems there are some legal matters that need to be addressed. As the guests began filing out, many whispering and casting glances back at us, Vanessa's composure finally broke. You planned this, she hissed. You knew all along, and you let me spend everything I had on renovations. I learned from the best, I replied. You and Patricia taught me all about patience and plotting. I just paid attention to the details you ignored. What do you want? Patricia demanded. Money. We can make a deal. I laughed. Money. You don't have any money left. You spent it all renovating my house and leveraging properties you can't afford. Speaking of which, I checked my watch. The banks should be receiving notice about the fraudulent collateral right about now. Vanessa collapsed into a chair, her designer dress pooling around her. We'll lose everything. Just like you tried to make me lose everything, I said. The difference is, I actually own what I have. Over the next few weeks, their carefully constructed financial house of cards collapsed. The banks called in their loans when they discovered Maple Grove couldn't be used as collateral. One by one, the other properties were foreclosed upon. Patricia and Vanessa's credit was ruined. They tried to sue me, of course, but the property records were ironclad. Dad had known exactly what he was doing with that transfer. Their lawyer advised them that pursuing the case would only waste what little money they had left. 6 months later, I sat in Dad's old study, restored to its original state, warm wood and leather back in place, looking over the final accounting. Vanessa's renovations had increased the property's value by nearly $4 million. The ultimate irony was that she'd actually done an excellent job with the improvements, even if her taste was a bit flashy for my liking. I heard the front door open and close, followed by familiar footsteps. They're finally moving out of their last property, Thomas said, settling into the chair across from me. Word is they're heading to Florida to live with Patricia's sister. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. Dad would be disappointed in how things turned out. Your father, Thomas said carefully, would be proud of how you handled yourself. You learned his lessons well, about business, about property, and about protecting what's yours. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far, letting them spend all that money on renovations. They made their own choices, Sarah. You didn't force them to spend that money or take out those loans. You just let them show who they really were. He was right, of course. Every step of their downfall had been orchestrated by their own greed and arrogance. I had simply waited and watched, protecting what was rightfully mine. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the beautifully landscaped grounds. Another of Vanessa's expensive improvements to my property. "What will you do with the place now?" Thomas asked. "Keep it," I said firmly. "Run it properly, the way Dad taught me. Maybe turn part of it into a boutique hotel." I smiled. After all, Vanessa did give it a world-class renovation. Thomas chuckled. "Your father always said you were the one who truly understood the value of things." "Not just things," I corrected him. "The value of patience, of attention to detail, and of letting people reveal their true nature through their own actions." As the sun set over Maple Grove, I felt at peace. The house was as it should be, in caring hands that understood its worth beyond just dollar signs. Vanessa and Patricia had tried to erase me from my father's legacy, but in doing so, they had only secured my place in it more firmly. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But watching someone renovate your house to their own destruction? That's a satisfaction that stays warm for a very long time.